has devoted a lot of time on the show to opening up Project 2025 and making sure that you know exactly what's in it, what the right is planning for the next Republican presidency. Today, we're going to start with a very revealing passage from the very first page. Quote, "Look at America under the ruling and cultural elite today. Inflation is ravaging family budgets. Drug overdose deaths continue to escalate, and children suffer the toxic normalization of transgenderism with drag queens and pornography invading their school libraries. Of all of the priorities that the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025 might have, of all of the items on their conservative wish list, you might be surprised to see drag queens and so-called transgenderism and pornography singled out within the first few sentences of a nearly 1,000-page tome. If you are surprised to see that there, well, don't be. It falls right in line with their fixation on anything that might threaten the conservative image of what the American family should be. The authors of Project 2025 made the connection between pornography and transgender people in a calculated and cynical move to equate the two. Project 2025 aims to define anything related to sex, gender, or sexuality as pornography. Its goal is to paint the very idea of people who are not straight and cisgendered as obscene, dangerous, and ultimately illegal."
Yep, you heard it right there, folks. Welcome back to the show. It is Sunday afternoon. We have an amazing show lined up for you today. So we've talked about Project 2025 relentlessly on this show. And one of they're targeting so many groups that's hard to keep track of.
Every group that's not white, straight Christians.
Right, exactly. But one of the groups they are absolutely obsessed with is the LGBTQ community, specifically the transgender community. They have demonized and dehumanized that community relentlessly. And their whole agenda of hate is extremely obvious, like she just said in the opening video, in the first few pages of not even the content of Project 2025. She's literally reading just the opening section of it, the forward
intro
of the whole thing.
The intro,
right, the intro.
The forward. Read our book. We hate everyone.
Right. So we're excited today because we have somebody coming back to the show. She was with us on the show before to tell her story of having to grow up in a Christian household as a transgender woman, and then transitioning later on in life, and the whole experience that she's had to go through and what she's dealing with now in real life and online, because we all know how horrible some people can be, especially online, because a lot of people will say things online that they normally wouldn't say in real life. Yep. So, and we met her through one of our favorite organizations, Stop Moms for Liberty. So let me bring back to the show Jenna Daugherty, the Director of Diversity for Stop Moms for Liberty. Welcome back, Jenna. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you very much, guys. I was going to say, I love that intro because that is exactly to a T the amount of hatred that we deal with. And it is just insane. But I always say it's just, they're jealous. They hate us because they ain't us.
Well, I don't know that I could form an argument against that. I mean, you look at, no, to take it like slightly dark for a moment, Mark Robinson, we know what he's been searching on his forums.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So, hey, I'm just saying, if anyone doesn't know, look that up.
Everything about that is classic cliche chaser.
Right, right.
Like it is. I mean, I called it because it's just what I deal with all the time. When someone is so angry about something and they just are projecting everything about themselves onto the group.
Marjorie
thinks I'm hot.
JD Vance.
I know he's got some bookmarks we'd like to see.
Yeah, exactly.
You're totally right. I mean, in so many ways, what I'll call the modern Republican hyper Christian nationalist hate everyone movement is undeniably a denial of their own nature. I mean, you don't hate a group as much as they do. We're talking about frothing at the mouth, rage, shaking, vein popping hate. There's no reason for that unless you're afraid that somehow touches your life directly. And in often cases, like you look at JD Vance's book that he wrote back in the day, where he basically kind of admits he might be gay or thought he was gay. All right. those people that
If
end
the
up running
eyeliner
those
doesn't
gay
give it away.
conversion camps. What was that?
If the eyeliner doesn't give it away.
Yeah, well, the eyeliner definitely might not give it away. But like, you look at all the people that run the gay conversion camps.
Yes.
They're gay. They're gay.
Yeah.
You don't torture a bunch of boys to not be gay if you're
Yeah.
not gay. Like, that's just not how it works. So,
Mhm.
you know, to be able to see someone in yourself who, I'm not saying clings to a religion for the sake of good, because I think you look at religion as what it absolutely is in reality versus what it has always been taken to the extremes of. You look at religion from our conversations as something that can be beneficial, helpful, kind, and so often, too often, it's used as a tool of hate. And there's no better example of that, of the modern hate against transgender people, is solely a religious based hate. There's no science in there. There's nothing. They don't understand science. They don't respect science.
Well, a
So
lot
it's
of
just
these,
coming from their belief in their religion, I guess.
well, a lot of these dipshits too think transgenderism was like recently invented.
5 years ago.
Donald Trump included. Donald Trump has said this. Like, he
Yeah.
honestly thinks that trans people didn't exist before the wokeness or whatever they want to say.
Yeah,
and
go
Elon
ask
Musk,
Native people.
I swear the whole reason Elon Musk is doing what he's doing is because he hates the fact that he has a transgender daughter.
I refuse to.
Dad.
I honestly think he's that petty.
Yeah,
He's a
that's
piece of
exactly
garbage.
what it is. He behaves as every other parent that hates their queer kid, and they hide behind this phony moral superiority complex, which is
I'm protecting my kid.
Yeah, which is an absolute joke
The
because
woke mind virus. Like, come on.
woke mind virus.
Uh-oh. Look who's watching today.
It's Liz. What's up, Liz?
Oh, hey, Liz. How you doing, girl? Love you.
So
No, I
tell
mean,
us.
His parents
go
are
ahead.
classic authoritarian. I mean, not classic capitalists, right? His dad ran
Wow.
an emerald mine in apartheid South Africa.
A
Doesn't
blood emerald
give
mine.
two shits about humanity. He exploits whatever group of people he can to make money. It's
He's
all
a colonizer.
because they're just trying to get power. That's why you saw him jumping around on stage behind that fascist.
Oh, we're going to touch
my
on that during the
God.
week. Don't
I've
you worry about
never
that.
seen a grown man look
Yeah.
more pathetic than him jumping around like an idiot on stage behind Donald Trump. Okay,
Well,
that's besides the point.
Exactly. The one thing I like to tell people is this is a story that is old as time.
Mm-hmm.
Religious authoritarian types using marginalized groups of people who can't fight for themselves as a group to be distracted by, to fear. Like, we barely make up 1% of the population, but somehow we're picking up all your children and cutting off all their genitals and mutilating them. You should see how much I have in my room here, how many kids I have hidden in my closet.
I'm more interested in how many genitals you have in Tupperware.
Yeah.
I'm concerned
that's
about
part of the dehumanization. That's
Exactly.
all.
I'm concerned about the right wing's obsession with genitals in general.
Oh,
because
yeah.
they talk about them a lot.
That's because it's on their mind all the time.
And they talk about inspecting them. They just installed a window in a, quote, gender-neutral bathroom.
Yeah.
What?
Who's going to look through that window? What are you going to do? That doesn't make any sense. But you're right. Like, they are upset. This all goes back to they're obsessed with kids' genitals because they're obsessed with their genitals.
Mm-hmm.
Either because they're convinced they're the wrong genitals or because they're just a little too happy with the ones they have. Like, it's weird.
It's actually a much deeper problem than that. It
Please.
stems from a Puritan religious mindset where they have to be able to. That's why, like, growing up, like when I grew up I grew up a fundamentalist Christian. My dad was a Calvinist. And if you don't
predestination.
Predestination, tulip doctrine, everything.
Yep.
And so the mainstream Christian culture in general, they have this obsession with purity, especially for
Purity culture, purity balls.
Purity culture, exactly.
Men taking their daughters to balls to give them rings that they're holding on to their chastity until they're married. Oh.
Exactly. It's a part of this
creepy.
cishet white Christian patriarchal mindset of controlling people. When you control people through the very core of themselves, then it's easier for them to be able to dictate children and let them do what they want.
Speaker of the House Mike Johnson reportedly, allegedly monitored. Well, no, actually, he admitted it. monitor his son's. I don't have to say allegedly on that one. Sorry, I have to throw that word out there every once in a while. He actually did it. Monitors his son's porn activity, or at least did.
Like, that's creepy.
That's creepy.
And that's why when Tim Wall started calling them weird was so perfect. Because
that makes sense.
Yeah, it takes away, like, yes, they are authoritative and they're very scary, right? But at the same time, normies think it's fucking weird because in that right-wing culture, that is so normal to them.
Yep.
But they
he disarmed them.
Yeah, they don't realize that their normalness in their right-wing Christian culture
is weird.
Weird to
really weird
American.
So
he's like openly bragging. Yeah, me and my son monitor each other's porn watching. What's the big deal? Like, and then
everyone are they like, hey, have you seen this one?
Yeah.
Dad, look at this one.
Dad, we're not.
All right. We're getting weird. Now I got all these weird images in my head.
My brain. All right, so tell us. All right,
take us somewhere normal.
All right, go ahead and tell us a little bit
real quick. Before we go into the next topic, I want to solidify my point. A lot of people don't realize when they say, like, oh, trans people, that was like 5 years ago, they didn't exist. You see all these dumbasses on Twitter like, remember in the 70s when there were no trans kids? Why are they all popping up all of a sudden? We've always existed, right? You ever heard of the left-handed analogy?
Oh, yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, like before, our culture used to shame people for being left-handed. People who were left-handed used to get swatted. Don't use your left hand. And then once
it's the devil's hand.
Was that?
It's the devil's hand.
It absolutely is the devil. When culture started normalizing left-handedness, people who identified as left-handed shot through the roof. And then eventually it petered out, right?
Yep.
And that's exactly what's going on right now with trans
people. You're 100% right. And the beauty of that whole argument is the word normal. Because the Christian nationalists think normal is what they define it as.
Yes.
And anything outside of that is wrong. But in reality, the reason you're seeing more people identifying as trans and more people identifying as LGBTQ or any of that is because in general, our society is realizing, oh, no one cares. Just leave them alone. And they who live by doctrine and only understand things in terms of what they are allowed and not allowed to think and believe and do can't accept that it's as easy as that. Yeah, we just stopped caring. No one cares. Be gay. I don't care. Like, I don't care.
Exactly. And another point too, and this parallels the current anti-trans hysteria rise in the United States. The Weimar Republic in Germany in the 1920s built one of the most sophisticated modern-day sex and gender institutes. His name was Magnus Hirschfeld, and they had one of the world's first gender confirmation surgeries, actually, in the world. It's the Magnus Hirschfeld Institute of Gender and Sex. And
until about 1932, 1933.
Exactly. And he saw the rise of fascism coming, because he saw the Nazis and Adolf Hitler rising. And so he actually escaped before Hitler took over. And then what was one of the first things the Nazis did when they took over? Oh, they burned down Magnus Hirschfeld's institute. They burned all his books. They
had a state institutionalized sterilization of LGBTQ people, of trans people, of people with learning disabilities, and then it just starts snowballing.
My grandmother was. I told that story on a previous episode. My grandmother's German. She was sterilized because she had a disability. That's how she ended up with my mom. She adopted my mom. So yeah. And see that talking about stuff like that, kind of the parallels to right now freak me out because all I see in Donald Trump and his cronies and the Heritage Foundation, all I see is the next Reich.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I see
the Third Reich.
It's gonna get the Fourth Reich is what I'm worried about. Because that's honest. When I read the Project 2025, obviously I read 900 pages of it because it's horrifying. But what I did read of it, immediately we started talking about that and comparing it to Nazi Germany because this is exactly what it is. It's
every other right-wing authoritarian government in
of course
history. Yeah.
This
there is a playbook.
Similar.
There is a playbook for dictators.
But this one though, to me felt especially German.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, there's
really
other
good,
dictators in the world, but I really feel like these people are modeling this whole thing after Adolf Hitler.
And they are.
I do. In my bones, that's how I feel about it. All right, so ask first question for you. I want to know.
More optimistic than you are about that, but we'll get to that later.
All right. Fair enough.
So
we need some
growing up.
It's crazy as a trans person, but as someone who was raised Christian and now agnostic, I've seen both sides. I've been studying election trends for the past 10 years, specifically when it comes to us. And I just don't think the American people are as insane and bigoted and nasty. They are pretty bigoted and nasty, don't get me wrong. You know,
the majority of people I don't think are. I believe, I'm a humanist, so I like to believe that the majority of people want to be good and want to do good. But we have a very large population now that we know. You know, they used to be small, little, tiny hate groups, but now they've all combined and they ladle themselves under a red hat. So it's actually kind of
now they're a national political party. So
right. So all right. So growing up, what was it like growing up for you? Like being Christian, homeschooled. Well, not just Christian, but Christian fundamentalism, like hardcore.
Did that?
Because I never grew up religious, so I don't know what that's like.
Was there a struggle within you from day one, I guess? Like, how was it in that world, seeing what you saw and being you, I guess?
Well, it's hard to describe because I have the benefit of hindsight in 2020 and looking back and being like, wow, that was crazy. But like, as a kid, that's my world. That's all I knew. And so it was church 3 times a week. You know, we would go on Sunday. Sometimes we'd go on Sunday night. And then we had these extracurricular activities that were only at church. And so I never saw any kids outside of church. That was literally my world. There was this organization called AWANA, which stood for Approved Workmen Are Not Ashamed. It was big in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. You know, I'm a 90s kid. And so that was my time where I got to see other kids because I'm this big, extroverted, outgoing, people-friendly person. And so my saving grace was my parents were like, they reproduced for the Lord. You know, they had 5 kids in 8 years. So
I kick ass for the Lord.
Yeah. I was the second at time. I was the second of 5.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So when I was homeschooled, that was my saving grace, was at least I have my siblings. And but I always had to be out. And so Awana, it had the aesthetics of like Boys and Girl Scouts, but really all it was just a program for kids to memorize a bunch of Bible verses.
Yep.
And it was basically, for lack of a better phrase, an indoctrination program. But I didn't realize.
Was it like you sees it?
Yeah. I didn't realize that's what it was because I was going every Wednesday and I got to hang out with my friends.
Yep.
And we would play games. And, you know, then we'd have a message.
Funny how insidious that is.
Yeah, exactly.
That is.
I remember, like, you know, my parents, I always joke, like, I came out of the womb and my parents were hardcore fundamentalist Christians. They were like, here's your Bible. Like, you know, like when I was 5 years old, I would sit in my bed at night and I would pray to God and I would be like, please change me into a girl. I don't want to be a boy anymore. Like, wow. I would sneak my sister's clothes and when no one else was around. For whatever reason, I just like instinctively knew I couldn't tell my parents that I had these feelings. Like they were, when I was younger, I don't necessarily remember them like being too openly homophobic or anything like, or queerphobic or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But I knew it was just, it's kind of inherently ingrained in you, like this almost like this militaristic, like authoritative structure that you live in, the house that you live in.
It was like logical to you before you even knew what logic was. You just knew that's not, don't touch that.
I wasn't allowed to do that. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just, it's very Orwellian in the sense that it's just always around you and you don't know anything else, you know. It's just like, that's what it is. The very few times I did question, my parents weren't like, oh, hey, don't say that. they would just say the classic things like, well, God's ways are not our own, and so we don't need to think about that, right?
The vague non-answer.
The vague non-answer. And I realized as a kid, well, that's fucking bullshit. Like, that makes no sense. But clearly my parents are not going to give me a straight answer, so I'm not even, I questioned a lot in secret.
Well, I don't think you're alone in that. I mean, you're taught not to question. But all kids have these questions.
Limited information too. I mean, we got to think the internet existed, but it definitely wasn't what it is now. So it had to be.
I had like a 14.4. It was even before 56K. We had Odyssey.
Oh God! When you got your internet in the mail on a disc.
Exactly. Yeah. It was so fucking slow. So yeah, and it was just like a bunch of chat rooms and shit. So yeah, like there wasn't much information that I got from the internet at that time.
It's interesting though. I'm very fascinated by people who are trans knowing that, maybe not having the words for it, but like
that's exactly what it was.
From all the stories that I've read from the people that I've had the absolute pleasure of meeting, the one thing that I keep hearing is you knew before you knew anything else. And the thing that makes me so angry, and I know I have to not always put all my anger on the quote big R religion, but is you so often see these kids and these adults and talking about when they were kids, how they knew something was not wrong, but different, because I don't like the word wrong. They knew that there was something about them that needed to be addressed, but they weren't allowed to question, whether directly or they just knew that, like you said. And how do we break away from that? Like, how do we let religion exist if it needs to be, because it should fall or grow on its own, but like ensure that kids are allowed to question and question anything? I mean, that's the point. Kids question. They don't know anything. They're learning. So the horror of, I'll just say, any system that indoctrinates kids is it doesn't let them question and it tells them what to think.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we get away from that? I mean, is there a way? Is that too broad a question?
No, it's not a too broad of a question. It's just that it's a question that requires time and requires nuance, right? Because, and a lot of times when you're on these cable news shows and they're like, you've got 30 seconds. So it's like, explain the Bible, 30 seconds, go. It's like,
right.
And you're just like, no, it's going to take a lot more time. It's really hard because, like, obviously, in what I would consider like my ideal culture, we wouldn't have these big establishments, like these big churches, right?
Mega churches.
If we did, it would be completely decentralized. Part of the reason why Christian culture in America is so terrible, like mainstream Christian culture, is because it's been operating under this right-wing conservative / billionaire think tank culture for the past like 50, 60 years. That's just modern Christianity.
And its salesman is Joel Osteen and everyone else with private jets.
Exactly. We're not even talking about like the old 1800s and 1700s that spawned slavery.
Liz is always right.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Liz. But that's the problem is once these big churches started getting established by rich white conservative males, of course, they started pushing this old school misogynistic culture of Christianity. And it's just like
and a lot revival
of
hate.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that this whole obsession with abortion didn't even start, or this whole obsession with Christians wanting to control culture didn't start with Roe v. Wade. It started with Brown versus Board of Education.
Yep.
And that was because the Supreme Court was like, no, we can't be segregating schools anymore. This is ridiculous. Doesn't matter if you're white or brown or whatever. All
American citizens are American citizens. Go to school.
Exactly. All children should have the opportunity to have a free education and be able to
a free secular education.
A free secular education. And they're like, whoa, not on my watch. Hell no. We need this patriarchal white Christianity. And then what really, because before Brown versus Board of Education, a lot of mainstream Christians actually stayed out of government, stayed out of politics. they didn't think because they believed very strongly in the concept of separation of church and state. And it wasn't until the 70s, really, until Bob Jones University. So Bob Jones University is one of these hardcore right-wing extremist, private Christian universities.
Okay.
And 1972 or 71, like a couple of years before Roe v. Wade, Supreme Court ruled that Bob Jones University had to start paying taxes. Before that, they were tax exempt because they were still segregating their university. And that fucking pissed them off. But they couldn't. Oh, man, we can't get our tax-free dollars and be racist. So
I mean,
government.
That's it.
That's exactly what it was. But society had progressed to that point where they can't outright say we want to be racist and be tax-free.
Yeah.
So they started harping when Roe v. Wade came down. That was the banner that they used to be like, we need the religious right and we need the moral majority. That's what Jerry Falwell.
Jerry fucking Falwell.
Majority in the religious right. So, and then of course Reagan, like everything else, made it worse because he started bringing these extremist right-wing Christian freaks into government directly. Right?
I have a special
foundation
for Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, everything that sucks, right, always goes back to Ronald Reagan.
Well, Reagan was the first person to be associated with the Heritage Foundation.
Yes, he openly associated because he was a philanderer who was twice divorced, and but he knew that he could exploit these people for votes. And what happened? He got in office.
Everything.
And told the airline strikers, "You're not allowed to strike anymore." And then
that's it.
Regulation City.
Unions were dead since then.
Yeah. Deregulation City. And then the worst part was these religious freaks got super emboldened, because these people.
Well, they had money and political backing. That's all you need.
Well, and they understand like real activism takes patience and it takes time. And
that's what they have more than any other group on this planet. The Christian nationalists have more patience. Like you could almost admire their patience. But it's
it's very zen-like. It's insane.
I don't like they know because
growing up.
Like you got to look at it this way: that movement, we'll call it, the movement of religious control, is not as old as America. It's like 5,000 years old. So they have the benefit of patience on their side.
Exactly. And where my story falls in, of course, is like my parents were those classic boomers that fell right into like. They were radical partiers, and then they had a radical conversion to Christianity. And so they took that radical devotion to its logical conclusion. And I was literally born and raised in that entire culture of just like my parents literally like raised me to be warriors for Christ. Like I remember when I was 6 years old, my dad tucked me into bed. It was the night Clinton got elected in 92. And he said to me, he's like, you just witnessed the most evil man to ever be elected president. Like
little did he know.
Little did he know. Yeah. And I just remember thinking, of course, because I'm 6 years old and I just take everything my parents say, right? And I go, well, that's terrible. Why would the American people choose to elect such an evil person for president? Like that was the mentality that my parents instilled in me from like I said, I came out of the womb. Here's your Bible. Like it's people don't realize just how insanely devoted this really fringe culture is and how much power and money they have.
Yeah.
How much they don't represent the average Christian.
Well, we could actually take a look at some of that because I do want to make sure we touch on your perspective on the hate that the trans community is getting now and maybe ways we could look forward to hopefully fixing it if we get through this election cycle. I just want to show some stats because like you said, it's not everyone that believes these horrible things. It's not everyone that agrees with what these fringe, very rich groups are doing. But when you look at how much they're affecting reality in our country, that's scary. So you look here, this was during 2021, asking if people support the Equality Act that would protect people from discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Well, nationally, 63% of people support it. Democrats are at 90%. Republicans were at 32%. I mean, you start to see a trend in the next few slides I'm going to show. To your point, that money and that message are being targeted towards a group of people that may have certain beliefs that have never been clarified or have only been obfuscated by hate and fear. Instead of answering questions and bringing people together, they're using division, and they're doubling down on the religion to affect political outcomes. But those outcomes are affecting people like yourself and people all over this country. Here are gender-affirming youth care bans in the U.S. Think about that. Those red ones are where gender-affirming care is banned. Banned. Now, if you're stupid like MAGA, you think that that means surgeries are banned. But if you actually educate yourself, you know that kids are not getting surgeries. Kids are getting intense therapy, and maybe in the rarest occasions on older kids, they might be getting puberty blockers. Maybe. But that doesn't stop people from believing it. That doesn't stop people from voting for Christian nationalism instead for beliefs of what Christianity might be teaching. So here's another one where gender-affirming care for minors is being outlawed. And in those red ones, that's where it will be banned as of January 2024. So we're almost at the end of a year where we're seeing bans popping up all over this country. And that's affecting real people. So you have kids that know or suspect that they might, maybe they don't even have the words to say in the wrong body or wrong gender. They probably don't have those words because they're not being taught those ideas. But then they start growing up and they start seeing the hate. They start going to school and seeing other kids where their parents are real assholes. They start hearing them talk about trans kids or, queer kids. It starts in school when that marginalization happens and trans kids start going into that shell and living their fake lives, I'll call it, living their untrue lives just to appease the people around them. I mean, when you're a kid going to school, you see a bunch of kids making fun of a trans kid or gayness in general. You're not going to be like, guys, I'm gay. Don't you like me? They're going to beat the crap out of that kid. That's what's going to happen. So in your activism, do you find it, are you trying to fix or re-educate? You know what I mean? Like, where do we go to make kids feel better about themselves and to stop the hate? Is it trying to educate people on how to be better, or is it trying to educate people on the harm they're doing?
Well, it's all, like I said, everything always comes back to nuance, because these are beliefs, especially when I'm talking with Christians, where it's fully ingrained in you from birth, right? And you'll hear a lot of Christians will say things like, oh, love the sinner, hate the sin, right? And
I have a picture for that one.
Yeah. And they don't hate necessarily. Like I like most people in general, and especially queer people, we struggled with internalized homophobia, internalized transphobia, especially when, you grew up in a Christian culture, and I grew up in the most extreme of extreme Christian cultures, right? So every group is different, and so I take a different approach with every group of people. If I come across an atheist, I don't have to use here's my bridge building conversations about Christians, because atheists don't give a shit about that. But there's also transphobic atheists, right? So, like,
really?
What? You mean society is just transphobic in general? And there's just institutional transphobia?
No, you're right, because I have a very biased view of, and this is a big fault of my own, because I was not raised strictly religious in any sense. So my atheism, I believe there's a little unfortunate elitism in the back of my mind, where if you're atheist, you don't believe any stupid stuff. But I know that's not true.
That's why I was atheist, because atheists were smug a lot of times and they annoyed me.
We are.
So that's why But Christians also, a lot of Christians just.
Yeah, I ended up
are susceptible to being smug pricks.
Yeah.
I ended up somehow becoming a deist. I didn't even know that was a thing.
So you love Thomas Jefferson.
I guess, yeah. Like I believe in God, I just don't believe
without
in
the slavery.
I can't buy religion because my path.
Oh, sorry. Go.
I was gonna say my path through life very briefly took me through the path for religion. I thought that maybe that was the answer, and then I realized these are stories. They're not to be taken literally.
You mean
so I just couldn't do it.
The entire world didn't flood and Noah couldn't fit every animal on the boat?
Right? Yeah.
That's why I like.
I understand it's supposed to be used as a source of inspiration, and that's good. I think faith, inspiration, and at least thinking there's something better beyond this hellscape that we live in is good for people's mental, stability sometimes. When some people lose their shit when they don't realize that, what they believe. If their belief system crumbles, I guess, like that's how a lot of MAGAs are. As soon as you put a little tiny crack in their belief system,
God.
Oh yeah.
Explodes.
One quick fun tangent I always tell people. The differences between like the New Testament and the Old Testament when we're talking about the Bible. A lot of these stories in the Old Testament, Jewish religion sees them as parables, which is exactly how Jesus would talk. Jesus would speak in parables.
He was Jewish.
Well, because the normies of his day didn't understand a lot of these high spiritual concepts. And so Jesus would speak in parables so the normal people could be, oh, okay, I get it now. That's what all these Old Testament stories are. Like the Adam and Eve, did they really fuck millions of people into existence? Makes no sense, right?
Yeah,
we're all related.
Exactly.
Well, to be completely fair about it, the world understood that incest was bad a long time ago. So,
but that's neither here nor there, right? But anyway, I take different approaches to different groups of people, and so it's hard.
Yeah.
I would love to see religion decentralized and not have so many rich financiers. But that's the same exact fight that Jesus was fighting with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And it's one thing I always tell people. This is like actually one of my favorite openings when I talk to Christians is I will say, hey, when Jesus was on earth, who did he hang out with? He didn't hang out with the Pharisees or the Sadducees. He called them whitewashed tombs and a den of vipers. He hung out with the outcasts, which in his day were the sex workers and the tax collectors. Well, who are the outcasts today? Trans people, gay people, people of color, right? Anybody that's marginalized. Jesus would be a trans activist.
And he was also a socialist, as far as I could tell. Which they hate too.
The rich man went to Jesus and said, dude, I want to follow you. And Jesus was like, get rid of all your shit. Get rid of all your money. Get rid of all your possessions. And he was like, but I can't do that. And then he's like, shit. And then he, and I don't know necessarily how much of a socialist, quote unquote, Jesus would be, but it's that aesthetic. It's that mindset of like, you are more devoted to money and wealth and power than you are serving humanity, right? And that's why, like, I always tell people, like, we don't need to necessarily get rid of spirituality and religion. We need to demonetize it, and we need to make it more human.
Well, it's funny because you're basically saying that Jesus would have hung out with and championed the majority of people, because in today's society, in our hyper-capitalist, insane society, there's only a few people that live to that supposed standard that the Christian right exemplifies or champions. But the majority of the people on this planet and in this country are marginalized by those small groups of people. Yeah. So when you have MAGA and the Republicans, and they're all about hating those marginalized people, there is nothing about, and again, this is coming from an atheist, and I'm looking at it very, very strictly. There is nothing about Jesus that those people are championing. They're championing the people that would have attacked a Jesus, would have criminalized a Jesus. So who are they really working for? When they say love your fellow man, it doesn't mean love your fellow white, cis, het Christians. It means love everyone. But that's not what the money wants them to believe. And the money is what's shaping their beliefs. The politics is what's shaping their beliefs, in my opinion.
And a lot, and that's where the problem lies, because there's so many lines that get crossed in this. There's
intentionally.
There's a lot of good Christians who were, for better or for worse, completely indoctrinated into this right-wing, misogynistic, transphobic, homophobic culture, and they don't necessarily realize that they were, right?
Because they're offended if you hint that they might have been.
I mean,
yeah. And again, as someone who grew up in this culture, I recognize that. So that's why, like, I try to break down the humanistic and realistic concepts of Christianity for them that are undeniable truths that they can't ignore. Because when I tell them that Jesus would hang out with me, most of the time they go, "You're right," and they can't get away from it. They can't escape it, right? And so how do we change this problem of overreaching authoritative religious repression and oppression? It's the same way you destabilize every other oppressive regime. You have to start from the ground up, and you have to be able to get the people from the ground up to realize they're using all these moral panics. Remember in the 80s when they thought
satanic panic.
Satanic panic is the exact same thing. Right now, we are the latest moral panic.
Go ahead, gentlemen.
I think one of the things we're going to have to definitely do, and this has directly ties to the election, because the only reason we're going through all this extreme amount of trans hate right now is because of the right wing, because of the politicians.
The only reason why.
Most people that are
about us.
Exactly. So these people were elected to office. So if we can, if they are the cause of all this trans hate, not all of it, but if they're the cause of the amount of trans hate, and we get rid of them, so they're not always on stage and they don't always have a powerful platform, hopefully that'll start the process of healing as a country.
What's very interesting to me,
hopefully,
is the importance of what you're doing as far as activism goes is the exposure. Because one of the biggest things that hate has going for it and fear has going for it is, to be fair, preemptive. They're making people afraid of something they've never encountered, of people they've never met. Like you said it yourself, and it's a scientific fact. We're talking like less than 1% of 1% of people are trans. So the vast, almost 100% of the people who hate trans people have never met a trans people, or don't know they've met a trans person, but have never spoken. See, I got you. Or they don't have any clue that you're normal too. You know what I mean? That they think all the trans people are dressed like drag queens, shooting fire, and have a sack full of babies like Krampus.
I mean, Donald Trump thinks there's some kind of magical transitioning booth at school that they put these kids in.
True. I built them. Yeah.
It's called the Drama Club.
That's funny. I can't believe that though, because it's just
little Johnny, then he comes home as little Jenny.
Right? Do you think that's how it works? Donald Trump's mind is so small that he honestly thinks that it's like a 2-day process.
To be honest, I don't really think he thinks that. The dude's a bullshit artist. He's been a bullshit artist his entire life. That's what when you hear him talk about trans people, it's so like I just laugh at it because it's so fucking stupid.
Well, he doesn't hold real beliefs. Some things he believes, and some things he just doesn't understand. That's it. That's all he is.
Well, no, it's just that he's like, what can I say here? Like, pull out of my ass because my young people will follow me no matter what I say. My favorite thing, one of my favorite things he's done is when he was speaking at Liberty University, right? We all know this dude is not a Christian. He doesn't give a shit about that. And he was referring to, this is one of my favorite Bible verses, 2 Corinthians. And it's like anybody that grew up in Christian culture knows it's 2 Corinthians.
Right. I remember them pointing that out. That comment that came up just now, pull that comment back up, because I was going to bring that shit up, because he actually said this today or yesterday, I think, with Elon at Butler, Pennsylvania, talking about Kamala voted for
that's one of my
illegal
favorites.
transgender migrants to have, like, no, she didn't. No, she didn't.
Transgender operations on illegal.
Do you know where that came from? Do you know where that came from? She answered a questionnaire once, and the question had to do with illegal migrants getting health care in prison. And she said, yes, that is what that came from. And they're saying, oh, well, that means, of course, they go all extreme on it. That means she's okay with illegal migrants having, all these surgeries done while they're in, like, oh my God, it gives me a headache. That's honestly where it came from.
He speaks in Mad Libs. It's just
Yep.
verb. It's just when it's
It's so
diarrhea
bad.
soup. Like, it's just it. I think for the most part, I think it's hysterical because it just shows you the just deep rotted stupidity of the MAGA cult. It's just like Trump knows he could just pull something out of his ass, and they're going to be like, "Oh yes, Lord and Savior Trump."
Yeah.
Amazing. When he talks about fucking Hannibal Lecter, he really.
Oh yeah, our dear leader. Yeah. Well, I like how you've been kind of really making it clear that this is all, and this is my words, not yours, but it is all about manipulation. And it comes from the willingness of the leaders of these faiths, of religions, of whatever. And I want to point out how easy it is to see the difference. And I think, again, I'll say it many times because I'm atheist. I'm not a big fan of religion, but I believe people should be able to follow a religion that doesn't harm anyone. And I think it's important in today's age where religion is being used so much like a giant sledgehammer to show that there are religious people that aren't assholes. So I want to point out someone who is this guy. In an online article, did you like that transition? The Reverend Albert Mohler, president of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, depicted gender transition as, quote, a blatant attempt to undermine the very order of creation, and, quote, the Bible reveals that any attempt to subvert creation ends in disaster, not in human liberation. So look, we could go on and on about, well, I mean, if God's omnipotent, he wouldn't let it happen. So if he's letting it happen, maybe it's okay. But we won't get into those little tricky things. What I want to do is point out this person. And I think this exemplifies exactly what religion should be, could be, and probably was meant to be before it got taken over by men who just want power. Quote, as a Christian leader, it's horrifying to me that Christianity and the Bible are being used by religious right to bludgeon people through these many bills, said Serene Johnson, the president of Union Theological Seminary in New York City. Quote, it wasn't something that the Bible even thought about, she said. The larger message there is a message of love and inclusion. Quote, to use religious language like that is an abomination, she said. They are threatening the lives and well-being of so many people around the U.S. and the world. So you have one person who believes their mission in life is to use religion to shoehorn people into a little box so that they can continue to get money to fund their private jet. And then you have someone who's like, maybe we should just help each other and not be pricks. So why is the one side, the mean side, the one that everyone, is it just because it so takes advantage of people's fears and people are so easy to placate their fears versus a message of kindness and hope that requires people to be open and trusting? Like, why do we have these two sides?
I mean, that's exactly it. The one thing I always tell people is being loving is hard. Being willing to have patience and being willing to meet people where they're at takes a lot more effort than to just say, oh, that person's weird. I don't like them. Fuck them. They're gross. Right? That is a very animalistic instinct, right? Fear, hatred, propaganda. It's able to surpass that level of your brain that uses reason and logic, and it goes straight to your emotions. It goes straight.
Reason and logic aren't instincts. Fear is an instinct, so that kicks in first.
And that is an instinct that overdrives rationale and love and reasoning. Because again, it takes a lot more effort to say, "Oh, that scares me," but let me take a step back and think about why that scares me. Oh no, there's no room for self-reflection. People that don't have the ability, or okay, I don't want to say that, because everybody has the capability of self-reflection. but people who choose to not.
Donald Trump doesn't.
Election. Well, okay,
Right.
maybe Donald Trump might be the exception.
One person.
And his dad. And his kids.
Pretty much everyone except Mary.
Exactly. Everyone except Mary. Especially like normal, rational, working class people, right?
Yep.
We're raised in a culture where we're not rich. We don't have everything at our fingertips. And so we have to work for stuff. So
Yep.
we understand that it's going to take an effort. We see somebody different than us. Well, that's okay. You know, it's going to take us a little time. We're going to have to work towards that. But when you're in a cult like MAGA and the leader is like this insane, rigid, authoritative, angry, hateful, selfish person where all he ever does is just care about himself, it gives people the it gives people what's the word that I'm looking for? The permission.
Right.
To be hateful, right? And so now people be like, no, it's okay. That guy told me it's okay. And people who are already prone to being more selfish are easily manipulated. And so it's hard to be able to fight that when you're talking to people who only care about looking out for themselves.
You know, and I think another problem too is like because like we pointed out, the transgender community is very, very small. And honestly, I didn't even learn much about it until I kept hearing about it. I'm like, why do they keep bringing this up? So like, I'm curious. So I look stuff up. Like, I want to know as much of the facts as I could possibly gather. You know what I mean? But a lot of people don't do that. So they hear stuff on like Fox News or they hear stuff at a Trump rally and then they don't go home and like, they're like, well, why would they lie to me? Well, guess what? That's the whole point.
Yeah.
They are lying. It drives me nuts that this is the toxic culture.
At the end of the day, and this is why way back at the beginning, I said that I'm more optimistic now than I was even last year. Because last year
was brutal.
Last year was brutal. And, you know, and I always have to preface it with, I'm white. I am privileged in a lot of ways in my transition that a lot of people in my community are not. And that's why I feel obligated to speak out. But at the same time, because I know Christian culture really well, I have a lot of great Christian friends that I love. I actually did this fantastic interview with a member of a very prominent Christian ska band that had a huge influence on me. And we had this really cool bridge building conversation. And one of the things that came out of it is why I told her in the interview, I said, at the end of the day, people just want to be able to live their own life and they don't necessarily really care about it.
Mike, you're typing so loud we can't even hear Jenna. Dude.
Oh my God.
Are you angry typing? Like, what are you doing, bro?
Sorry.
That typing is so transphobic.
I'm sorry. Oh man. Wow.
How dare you?
That bad.
Just kidding. All right.
It just kept getting louder and louder. He's like, mother.
But for reals.
I will be getting a boom soon.
When you look at the polls in the elections for the past 9 years, when it comes to the topic of trans people, people don't give a fuck. It's a really, really bad electoral strategy because it crashes and burns every single time. I tell people, I do believe in my heart of hearts, if I'm being honest and realistic, most cis people don't really care about us.
No.
But they don't want to hurt us. They don't want to take away our rights. And for me, as an activist, I think that's a great place to start. Because
that's so funny. I'm sorry. Go ahead. That really struck me.
Because a lot of times, and for good reasons, there's a lot of trans people that I have a lot of cis friends who go like, why are trans people so hostile to me? And I tell them, well, think about it from this perspective. When you've been kicked out of your house because your parents don't want you, when your job says you're trans, we don't want to hire you, when your doctor says, oh, I don't want to help you because you're trans, literally every aspect of society is working against us. Wouldn't you be angry?
You start to put that wall up.
Yeah.
That wall of suspicion.
I mean, you have to be defensive almost.
I mean,
and at the end of the day, I'm obviously not going to say we should be mean to people, but at the same time, I'm going to tell my fellow trans people, Feel those feelings. Be angry. You deserve to be angry because
Yes.
you're being treated like shit.
100%. You're allowed to feel what you feel when it's justified. I mean, I think what I find really interesting is you said that, you know, straight people don't care about trans people. And I know what you mean is your existence does not take away from my life. And the most supportive thing as a straight person that I can do is just see you as someone who exists. You're not anything more than I am. You are just a person trying to survive whatever this thing is we call life.
Yeah.
And to make it anything more than that almost puts an eye on it that doesn't need to be there. I look at it as very simple. Everyone deserves the same fundamental basic human rights. If your argument takes that away from someone else, you're wrong. End of story. Don't care if you're trans, black, anything else. You have a right to exist. End of story. There's nothing else to say. I don't have to quantify that. I don't have to qualify that. There are no additional adjectives and verbs that you have to add. You're a human. You have a right to live. The people that don't think so, they're in the wrong. Which leads me to ask the question, I feel like your enthusiasm for activism and the way you approach it is a relentless kindness. You know, you are going to provide facts, but you are not going to hate anyone because of their beliefs. You're going to try and educate them and expose them to truths, to your truth. I think people meeting you would be nuts not to be like, hey, trans people are awesome, because you're a great advocate for it, you know, and also your patience is just, I don't have any patience. So you are really good at that. But I think the relentless kindness, can that win? And it goes back to what Jeremy said about voting out the assholes. Can we educate people enough? Can we expose people enough to the reality of our fellow human beings to let relentless kindness win? How do we win with just being nice to people and educating them? Because you're pretty optimistic. So
here's why I am optimistic. The loudest minority, at the end of the day, is always a minority, right?
Yep.
And those are the bigots.
That's
right?
why they're loud. They need to see the attention.
I always tell people, and I've always said this, even as my former self, whether it's Christians or Muslims or Jewish people or atheists or whatever, every group has three types of people: assholes, really cool people, and people that are just like, I don't really care, right? When it comes to bigots, fuck them. Those are the people that I will like show all my rage and hatred for, right? Because they don't see me as human, right? They want. That's the big thing about the religious right and the Republican Party and all these really horrible institutions is they take us apart piece by piece till we are seen as monsters. And when you could see somebody as a monster, it justifies in your mind doing the absolute worst inhumane things to somebody.
Right.
Oh, it's almost like illegals are vermin.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, that is
they're poisoning the blood of the country, right?
Hey, it's literally what Hitler did to the Jews.
Literally what
he turned the public against them, told lies about them, dehumanized them so when the tragedies, all the tragic stuff started happening, everybody is like,
yeah, I mean, but they're barely human anyway.
Yeah,
exactly. But that's the point. The dehumanization leads to. That's why I freak out when I see, because dehumanization is just the beginning.
Dehumanization leads to atrocity.
Exactly.
And
Thank
so with those people,
because I couldn't figure out a word.
I got you.
Yeah, those people are who I save my righteous anger for, right? Like how Jesus
righteous anger. I like that.
Righteous anger for the Pharisees, right? The people that are cool, that love us and are supportive, like our allies, I do what I call maintenance. They're great. Most of the time, they do the right thing. Every once in a while, they mess up. Unintentionally say something transphobic, and I will say, whoa, okay, just to let you know, don't say that.
See, I love that,
but don't say that. You can't say that.
I think that one of the things that I find very important is the ability to not just take criticism, but to be told flat out, I know you didn't mean it, but you're wrong.
Yeah.
To be offended by that is to be so closed-minded. That scares me. Like, I encourage, like, Perfect example. When Liz is on with us and I say something really stupid about education, she corrects me right away. And you know what? That's called learning. I want to be better than I was, be better than I am. So if I ever say something that's totally off base, I hope people know that I don't mean it in a negative way. But if I don't know what I'm saying, I need someone like you to point it out to me.
There is a level of involuntary ignorance within all of us. Like, you can't know everything.
Yeah,
you know
and we've also been raised and grown up in a society that isn't as inclusive as we want it to be. So we're indoctrinated in our own ways, Jeremy. I mean, you and I suffer from this all the time. We say we're just two straight old white guys that are doing their best to learn and give other people's voice the same standing that we naturally have just by being born. You know, so we're going to be wrong a lot, and I want to know that.
All right,
exactly. So with bigots, I say fuck them. I don't worry about them unless they want to come after me. With allies, I'm not worried about them unless I have to do like quick maintenance, right?
Maintenance. I love that phrase. I love that.
So my focus are the people on the fence that people go, meh. Those are the people I focus on. Because if I can continue to take them and bring them to our side, that's one less person that's going to be manipulated by hate and bigotry. And the key is to always humanize us. When you humanize somebody, it's hard for you to see them as anything less after that.
That is great. I like that.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Because, and I've had it happen so many times over my life as an activist, where I gave somebody grace when they didn't necessarily deserve it, because I could see in their heart what kind of person they were. And my investment paid off.
That's hard to do. Like, that is so hard to do.
It is. Well, unfortunately,
that is the way I feel. For me, that is the only way we are going to get past this, is if we humanize each other and we stop putting each other in boxes.
You know what?
Actually, I think. No, I was gonna say, Mike, I gotta get going, but
I was gonna say that's actually the perfect way to stop. Yeah, that's.
Oh my God! Thank you so much, Jenna. Unfortunately,
oh my God! Thank you guys for.
Thank you so much for coming on. You know, the whole point of this show was we wanted to talk about politics, have some fun, but we wanted to make sure this show was a voice for all groups, all communities, that we can bring people together. We want to bring as many people together as we possibly can. And the only way we do it is if we openly talk about it. We have to talk about racism. We have to talk about what's going on with the LGBTQ community. I mean, there has to be an open dialogue, or there is, communication is key. You know, angry communication is fine as long as it's a coherent debate back and forth. You can have arguments, but when you're closed off to the reality of the world outside of your little mind, that's when it becomes a problem. So we definitely want to have you back on, Jenna. Thank you so much for coming on.
Back on.
Definitely. We'll do this again for sure. Thanks everybody for watching. Yeah, no problem. Thanks everybody for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day. We will be putting out some videos. Micah and I have a recording session on Tuesday. We'll be putting out some more videos later this week, so keep an eye out for those. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I should have said that halfway through the show, but I keep forgetting. Other than that, have a great rest of your day. And like always, we will talk to you soon. Thanks.